Okay, before we head into the next subphylum, I've got this for the subphylum we just did. Um, Pardon the water spots, I've been cleaning up in the lab while I've been waiting for videos to upload and then transfer and then download into Blackboard. It's a whole thing. But these are the chelicerates. Now here are the trilobites or trilobites. They went extinct about 500 million years ago. Actually very common fossil in New York State because this state was mostly underwater in a shallow ocean then, and so these guys wound up in the sediments. You'll see them show up in both subphyla because we're not really sure how they connect. I suspect if they still existed, they'd be in their own subphylum, separated out from these guys, but hard to tell because we can't really get into them and see what's on their innards. But got your horseshoe crab, cut away there. You got your spider, you've got your tick, you've got your mite, see very similar basic shape, and you got your scorpion, all in the chelicerates. Now we're looking at the mandibulates. The mandibulates are a pretty diverse group. There's a number of subgroups to the mandibulates, but they do have mandibles, pinch, 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 mouth parts. The chelicerates, the mouth parts are modified. If you go back far enough they're modifications of legs in the front. Mandibles were always just mouth parts. They were never mobility structures. And of course they have antennae, which serve a lot of different functions in both the segmented worms and the arthropods. I'm going to throw this up early so that I don't forget it. The mandibulates have a lot of groups, but these are the four major groups. Two of these are probably a major group because they're land groups and you might possibly run into these guys. The most diverse groups are here and here. These are the crustaceans, these are the insects, these are the millipedes, and these are the centipedes with a cutaway there, cutaway there, cutaway there, cutaway there. When we do the lab, we'll work with crustaceans, and we will work with a crayfish as a typical crustacean, and with insects using a grasshopper as a typical insect, and a cricket, just to give you an idea of some of the stuff when it's active. So these are mandibulates. And write down the mandible antennae thing. The crustaceans are primarily a water group. There are not a lot of land crustaceans. If you flip it over rocks, you may run into them though, because the little guys that look like they've got a shield over their backs, and if you flip them over, they have a lot of legs that are sometimes called bugs or potato bugs or armadillo beetles or potato beetles. They're not beetles. Beetles would make them insects, but common names work a lot of different ways. They represent a group called the amphipods, which again are mostly aquatic, but there are a couple of what I call terrestrial land-based groups. Not terribly well suited to the land. They dry out really easily, which is why they tend to live under stuff where it's fairly moist. And the rest of the crustacean group live in the oceans and in fresh water. And a tremendous amount of them are very, very small. In the upper levels of large bodies of water that are not moving much. You have living things. You have a whole ecosystem. So you have algae, bottom of the food chain, and then you've got things that eat the algae and things that eat the things that eat the algae. And of the living things in that layer that kind of just go where the water goes, that's the plankton. Plankton is a drifting ecosystem. If there's a current, they follow the current. If there's no motion in the water, they don't move with the water. And you find them in large still bodies of fresh water also. There's plankton in the larger lakes around here. And around here, since there's an outflow to the lakes, when the water in a big lake starts to move, when it's barely moving, they will back away from it. When I used to teach water systems here when we had a natural resources part, and I took people out on field trips. They would go out onto the lake and they would drag a net behind them, what's called a plankton net. It would pick up all the little bitty guys in the surface of the water. And while they were out in the boat, I would drop a plankton net on the spillway. Is that virtually all of the local bodies of water have dams on them, and there's water going over the dam. And so I'd put the net there, and the net in the spillway would never catch anything because the things in the pond or in the lake would move against the beginnings of the current, so they wouldn't get caught because they wouldn't be happy in the streams below the lakes. They live in the surface. So they don't always go exactly where the water goes. In fresh water, sometimes you have to resist that. But in the oceans, they kind of go where it goes. And crustaceans are a major, major part of that. There's two particular species of what are called copepods. They look like they have oars on the front ends of them, and they use them that way. Two species that, if you drop a plankton net into an ocean anywhere on the surface of the planet, you'll catch a bunch of them. And so they are probably, of the animals, the most numerous of the animals. Just the two species are found basically everywhere. And there's lots of them. They don't go all the way down. They tend to be in like this much of the surface of the water, but that's still an awful lot of water for the surfaces of all the oceans. And of course, this includes things that we eat. It includes the crabs and the lobsters, and the crayfish for people that eat crawdads. Shrimp are in this. There's a type of crustacean called a mantis shrimp. It's not really that closely related to regular shrimp, but it's got these back folding legs, almost like you'd see in a praying mantis. And it can whip them out so quickly that it can actually crack open things like shells. And if you grab one and it grabs a hold of you wrong, it'll break your thumb. If you have them in tanks, you have to be careful that they don't get annoyed at the wall, because they can break the glass in the wall of an aquarium tank pretty easily. They move so quickly that they actually cause air bubbles to form in the water. It's called cavitation. Enough activity and air bubbles get generated out of the water itself. Nasty little guys who have really fascinating eyes. They're predators. They grab things and eat them. And they have these two eyes on stalks with 3 pupils in each eye, so they have hexadotic detection. And they have detectors. They can detect virtually any type of light that's available to them, including stuff we don't know what the heck it's seeing. There's some detectors we haven't figured out exactly what they're picking up with them. So they're fascinating little animals. On land is where the other groups are. The millipedes and the centipedes. Good idea to set yourself up a little table with the columns. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to tell you what to put on it, but I'm not going to do it. These are both terrestrial groups, millipedes and centipedes. Millipedes tend to have cylindrical bodies. They're round all the way around. Centipedes tend to have flat bodies. That's one of the differences. Millipedes are plant eaters. Centipedes are predators. They catch and eat other things. Millipedes are unusual among land arthropods in that every segment, you can see the rings that show you where the segments are. You can see the segments on a centipede. Every segment has 2 pairs of legs, where in the centipedes, there's only 1 pair of legs. And when millipedes move, their legs all move almost like, they look like cilia. They move in kind of a little wave. Whereas centipedes tend to move very quickly, they chase things, and so they don't have all of their feet on the ground all at once, is that they do this wiggly thing, almost like a sidewinder rattlesnake would do, and they pursue things. They're both poisonous, and they're often warning colored, is that these guys very typically are black or have black bands on them. These guys are red and orange, the things that they kind of show up. But the poison works differently. These guys can defend themselves with the poison that they also kill things with. They have these spikes sticking out the side that are called a poison claw, and they stick that into things and poison goes into it. Not really a stinger, not really a jaw piece, so it's not really a bite. So technically, if you got poison from a centipede, I don't know what you call it. Ow, it hurts, you know. These guys, if you annoy them, like you grab one, they will mix some chemicals together in some pockets along their bodies and exude cyanide gas. As these guys can get pretty big. We've had big ones in the lab. They can get kind of this big and, you know, that big around. And they're very easygoing. But if you do grab one and you pinch it, not real tight, but enough to make it feel like it's been grabbed, you can actually hear it goes tss. And you can smell cyanide gas has a kind of a nutty odor to it. And so if you pick something up, I've seen frogs grab a millipede, and you know, the tongue goes out, the tongue comes back. And these are frogs I had in the lab. They very quickly went over to something, there were rocks available to them. They went over and stuck their tongue out and rubbed their sticky tongue on the rocks to get the millipedes the hell off. And then, even though I left the millipedes in the tank with them, I never saw them ever take another shot at millipedes. And frogs are not bright. They tend to go after anything that moves. But they very quickly learn not the black guys, not the millipedes. You put in mealworms, which are the same size and move in a very similar way, they'll scarf those up really fast. But millipedes, once they've learned, they don't want to re-experience that. Not enough to kill them, but enough to definitely make them spit the millipede out, which is, you know, fine for the millipede. So 2 different types of poison exuded differently. Both of these exist around here. You see these guys turn rocks over. Sometimes defensively, they form a little coil, you know, a little coil, like a coiled hose, as a way to protect themselves. But there aren't that many things there are a few things that eat millipedes, but not a lot. So I'm going to break this up into 2 parts because the last group are the insects, and we got a decent amount to talk about in terms of insects. So I'm going to stop this here.